Welcome, folks. This afternoon we are streaming live a presentation as part of our mental health ministry here at the First Presbyterian Church of Ashland. I'm Dan Fowler, I'm the pastor here. And today we have the privilege of having Joanne Kosta with us. She'll be doing a presentation on addiction and codependency. If this is something you happen to watch, we'd love to know and to know your thoughts. If you're watching us live, if you want to text, chat in, and let us know who you are, we'd love to know that. If you watch it later, please be sure to let us know you did see it. So let me open us up in a time of prayer, and then we'll go ahead and start with the day. God, we thank you for Joanne's knowledge and ask for your blessing on her presentation. We ask you to help us as we struggle with addictions and codependencies and all of the things that come to us in this world. Help us to live as your people in the things that we do and the things that we say. I pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. And here's Joanne.
Oh, look.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that's few people.
Hi.
Hi.
That's okay.
So we are live broadcasting now, so.
Come on in. Okay, welcome to our presentation on addiction and codependency. It takes a level of bravery to have conversations about this. So I appreciate that you're here, and I appreciate that you're watching on YouTube. If you would like to have a copy of the handout that our participants have right now, there's a couple of places on the slides that you'll be watching if you're watching on YouTube that are a little bit like you're scratching your head, and it's not for you to scratch your head. So if you want to get the program like in the more original form, then they can call the church. And what is that number, Dan? 541 482 3536. Okay, good. So let's go to the first slide. And what I'm going to be doing today is really talking about, and there's a lot of information, so I will go pretty fast. And I'm very open to questions and answers, of course. Perhaps there's another way. Well, I guess my contact information isn't on the slide, but Dan can help you with that, Reverend Dan, if you would like that. So I'll go a little bit on the fast side, and a lot of this you probably already know. So I hope you'll bear with me. So we think of addiction in our minds most of the time as substance addictions, what we drink, what we swallow, what we inhale, and that's not wrong. So notice on the first slide that the faces of addiction speak to substances: alcohol, cannabis, which is your marijuana, synthetic and the natural. I used, instead of some of the bigger words that they use to describe these, I just used our common words like calming medications or anti-anxiety medications. And sometimes when you're looking at the generic, you don't know exactly what kind of medicine is this anyways. But we can very, very easily become addicted to the family of what we call benzodiazepines, which are your calming medicines. And they really feel wonderful because they feel like you've just wrapped yourself in a warm blanket that came out of the dryer on a really cool or cold day. And so the diazepines can really be something that people want. And I'm talking about like a lot of people, like all people, not just people that are seeking drugs. Anyone that has problems with anxiety, these medications really, they make you feel better. They don't make you better, but they make you feel better. And these should be only used, in a legitimate sort of appropriate, healthy way for a very short period of time in an acute period of stress or, and not a chronic thing. But remember that maybe if you're listening and you've got a bit of age on you, you might remember your parents, possibly your mother, who said they had a nervous problem. They had problems with their nerves. This is when we really experienced a lot of the Valium uptake, and Valium is absolutely one of the benzodiazepines, and people absolutely got addicted to it. Pain medicines is another one that we speak of. There's a variety of them. They're called a zillion different names. Of this list here under pain medicines, heroin and the speedball is really the only ones that are completely synthetic and not used in a medical sense at all. The rest of these are medical preparations that people have developed a dependency and abuse with. Stimulants, this is where your crack cocaine comes in. Steroids give a person that feeling, and that again is a regular prescription medication. Steroids like prednisone or all of a sudden I'm not thinking of the other ones, but the zones, the prednisone, and those make a person feel a lot better because they decrease inflammation and they help you with energy. And so, you understand sometimes how you could easily fall into addiction. Amphetamines they're used for ADHD and for narcolepsy, but they're abused for energy. And pseudoephedrine was used commonly as a nasal decongestant, and ephedrine was used as a weight loss medication. Methamphetamine, and there is a preparation of methamphetamines that is used for ADHD and obesity in a legal sort of way. But all of these medications that are used in a legal way are also abused and very, very, very dangerous. All of these medicines medicines or drugs have the ability to be extremely dangerous. Hallucinogens, including LSD and PCP, also known as angel dust, psilocybins, which is also the mushrooms known as shrooms, ecstasy or MDMA. It's a big deal, and right now I'm really sad to say that within even the counseling profession that we're starting to, they are really starting to push using these hallucinogenic medicines, drugs, as a way to treat trauma. Personally, and I will say personally, I think there's much safer and much better and much less risky ways of treating trauma. So, but again, all of this stuff can be very, very motivated by money. It's got potential to be a huge moneymaker, and one analysis projected that the psychedelic or the hallucinogenic market could be worth more than $8 billion by 2028. Inhalants is something that probably children discovered, or even maybe office people as they were running their old mimeograph machines and as they were using paint thinners in the unventilated, because all of a sudden you felt a little like woo-hoo. And some people really like that feeling, but again, it's extremely dangerous. Caffeine is also considered a substance addiction as an energy pick-me-up. Tobacco, chewing, smoking, used for relaxation, a feeling of well-being. Steroids, like I mentioned, the pain relief, energy bursts. It's hard to give that stuff up when people start using it legitimately, because when they're not using it, they don't feel as well. But when they are using it chronically and over a period of time, there are negative consequences to the body. You can go to the next one. So the faces of addiction, which are called process or behavioral addictions, are much more familiar to, even the last ones were extremely familiar because we want fixes when we don't feel well. These are things where we begin to take on behaviors that make us feel good and make us feel better. And at some point, some of these behaviors that are extremely helpful all of a sudden kind of cross the line into using them for medicating ourselves. So workaholism, you hardly could believe that having a very huge work ethic could ever be a problem, but we'll talk about why that's a problem. It's when it's taken to an extreme. And that's the truth with many, many of the things that people become addicted to. Spending, buying. Now this is use of the internet, use of social media, even watching TV, even certain streaming devices. Smartphones, people cannot go to dinner many times without having to look at their phone several times through dinner. And it's not because there's an emergency that they're concerned about. If there's an emergency, that's something very different. We're taking sex, which normally, and we'll talk about how this occurs, but we're taking sex to an elevated excitement level. And this is when we're starting to talk about risky sex, sex that's more promiscuous than it is just shared between love. Pornography is huge right now. It's probably our fastest growing process in behavioral addiction. And what's really frightening, especially as we just came out of the pandemic, is that we had so many children locked in their rooms. So many, and I say locked, I mean in their rooms, doing homework with access to full internet, including pornography, and they have gotten, it's a way for them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but they've done some learning, and they have a beginning of a sexuality that they're exploring. So it's a very big deal. And as we will also talk, all of these addictions change the brain. And so as we're thinking about children using any of these addictive substances, we're looking at a developing brain that probably is still really developing till you're looking at 21, 22, 25, and maybe even beyond. Hoarding, it's not a bad thing to be conservative and to reuse and use things, but sometimes it goes to an extreme. Gambling, eating in ways that are not reasonable, that are not safe, that are not healthy. Sometimes people become excessively attached. See, you can start to hear attachment and addiction in the same neighborhood. Attachment is necessary and it's good for us to be alive, but when it starts to be addictive, when it starts to be something we do when we don't even really want to do it or don't need to do it, and this is where we start to see excessive attachment to attention. Excessive attachment to fantasy or romance is an example of people that really struggle in committed love relationships, because what happens in romance, the highs of romance, is not what you can consistently expect in committed love relationships. And so we're having a lot of disintegration of the possibility of committed love because people are attached excessively. Okay, so now we're starting to see where codependency comes in. This is being right, being in control, do what I want you to do, fixing others, doing for others what in reality, if we could take our emotions back, these are things that people really could and need to be doing for themselves. But we become so compulsive, so I don't know the right word. I want to say so missioned, so determined that we must take care of other people. We must fix them. We must do things for them that goes beyond nice and goes beyond kind, but takes now responsibility for other people's lives. In your PowerPoint, if you want to, and you don't have to, you can follow along, and I think you will do fine with that. You can make notes. I believe that B has brought some pens or pencils over here, but I just wanted to let you know, excessive power. There are people who love the high that they get from power. We can start to be looking at that as an addiction. How about rage? And when I release rage, I feel better because it's getting out of my body and I'm starting to do something that's a behavior that is not helpful, is not safe, is not appropriate, but I keep doing it if I have a problem with managing my emotions. Violence of word and deed. You can go to the next one. So we might ask ourselves why we're so slow to acknowledge addictions and codependencies in general. Why is it that people don't really want to talk about substance addictions or even process addictions and codependency? Why do we want to believe that it does not apply to us when in fact, as one of the members of our congregation here said, you can hardly find a person that addiction has not touched? And so we have then determined that, oh yes, if I just kind of close my eyes, if I just tell myself, no, I don't really have that problem in my neighborhood, in my family, even in myself. So it's hard to face my part in all of this. What could I be doing that could be better? And the feelings that go with addiction are huge. Grief, tremendous amounts of shame and guilt, being overwhelmed. And then there's another piece that says, well, I'm not giving up blank just because you've got a problem. So we don't want to change our lifestyle. So I have to ask sometimes, if I am so determined that I cannot give up something that is toxic to someone else in my family, and I insist that it's my right, I have to wonder if I'm not on the beginning of that addiction trail myself, because I don't want to go without it. If strawberries made somebody in my home very, very sick, would it be all right to not eat strawberries? It's just a question. So I don't want to give up my vices, and don't forget that money is to be made keeping people held captive by addictions and by codependency. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's real. It's been as long as we've had history, right? And next slide, please. So addiction is defined by a primary, it's a disease that takes on its own diagnosis, and other diagnoses come from it. Okay, so it's a primary diagnosis, it's chronic, it's progressive. Chronic means it lasts for a long time. Progressive means it not only lasts for a long time, but it gets worse over time. And it has the characteristic of being a relapsing disorder. Now, there are other relapsing disorders as well, and I'm thinking of, say, for instance, diabetes or congestive heart failure, when I know that there's things that I do that aren't good for me, and so I've really been on a path. And then for whatever reason, I fall off. And that is actually the case with addiction as well. So it is characterized by compulsive behavior, which means doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Or I do it because I theoretically can't help it. I do something compulsively over and over time. It's unpredictable in how it affects the person. And the person may have a loss of control while using the substance that they never expected. And they surely didn't intend it. So when somebody makes promises that says, I'm not doing that anymore, I'll stop that, they really mean those promises. And they pray to God that they don't break their promise. Well, that's another discussion another day. But I think it's a good thing to always ask for help, God's help, other people's help. But this is a very, very big deal. Addiction is not small, and sometimes it takes us falling down and embarrassing ourselves. I don't even necessarily mean literally falling down, but just coming to so much pain. We used to say, let the alcoholic hit their bottom, because that's the only way that they're going to get it. The only way that they will get it. What is frightening now is that with drugs and with the way that people are combining drugs and alcohol, we really are at risk that that person's bottom could come tomorrow. And if it comes tomorrow, they might die. And so what about a huge spike in codependency? So we'll talk about what codependency is next. You can expect changes in physical and mental well-being. We continue to use the substance or the process despite what we didn't intend to happen. There might be periods of abstinence. In fact, sometimes people will do abstinence so that they can prove that they don't have a problem, but they do typically go back. Without effective treatment, this brain disease is life-threatening at worst, and psychologically, physically, spiritually traumatizing, because it takes the very soul of a person and doesn't leave them with their personhood anymore. They're just a victim of the disease. Although if we look close enough, we can absolutely find that person in there. There's something that I want to say right now, and that is there's a principle of what we call reality living, and that's done by Gary Chapman. Gary Chapman has also done the 5 love languages. It's very good stuff. But Gary has given us the principles of reality living, and his last one I absolutely love, and it is love is the most powerful weapon for good in the world. So it's not this treatment center, it's not this magic drug, it's not this determination. Love is the most powerful weapon for good in the world, and I absolutely love that. So I absolutely believe that families, friends, anyone who can learn about addiction and codependency so that we're not actually making it worse by our behaviors, we're actually contributing to it being better, and we love in healthy ways. Okay. Chapman, Chapman, Reality Principles. There's 6 of them, and they're very excellent. They are in the slideshow? I don't think so. Maybe that one is. Love is the most powerful weapon. That's what you remember seeing. With adherence to treatment, okay, because treatment does matter. I mean, why would we pull our own teeth if we can go to the dentist? So why would we not avail ourselves for mental health and substance abuse problems or addiction problems? Why would we not do that? So adherence to the best of the treatment principles. Personal motivation. If you want to get better, that's wonderful. We don't want people to lose hope. And so that's all the more reason why stay with them, as opposed to do what I say, and then when they don't do what I say, then I say, I don't want anything to do with you. If you must do that for your own personal protection, it's certainly understandable, but maintaining that personal motivation is huge. And sometimes mothers and grandmothers and fathers and children are the thing that keep people trying. Otherwise, they would give up and they would give their lives over to addiction completely. Effective peer supports. If we have those 3 pieces in place, we really do have a real chance of, and I want to say beating this. You will never, I hate it when I hear someone say, I'm a recovered alcoholic, or I used to be an addict. That makes me very nervous because I think we always have to understand that it's always there, just waiting for me to take just a little curve to the left or to the right, or just a little bit of my own denial, and it's off and running again. Okay, go ahead and next slide, please. That one we can skip. Codependency is also a primary disorder. It's characterized by coping or surviving in ineffective ways, though, darn it. Because in the moment I'm surviving, but in the long run, it's not helpful. I'm doing something that's not helpful. I said by doing something that's effective. Well, it's ineffective in the long run. It's effective in the short run. So when I control, when I enable, when I threaten, when I scream, when I do all the things that are part of codependency, that was actually a typo in the slide, but in the short run, it's effective. I get my way. But in the long run, it's extremely ineffective, and I do it over and over, and I expect different results. Again, a compulsive behavior. And it's in the presence of persistent emotional and physical stress. Then that's certainly my behavior as a person who has codependency generates stress. There's no doubt about it. But in reality, this person isn't just out to make people's lives difficult. This person is under tremendous emotional and physical stress. Where did it come from? By the fact that they have a loved one whose actions, behaviors, choices, disease are frightening them to death. And so they themselves then start to become, to have a disorder or a disease, no matter how you look at it, because they begin this process of thinking that they're going to conquer addiction by sheer will. Addiction is almost always, or codependency is almost always present following somebody else's addiction, but it's also passed down from generations without any evidence of ongoing addictive behaviors. What that means is I may not be able to identify where this addiction pattern where this codependency behavior came from. But it's clear when you start to look at family patterns that the ism, we used to think of alcoholism, that the ism is the family disease, the stuff that's all in the fray. The ism is passed down from generations. People are doing the best that they can, and then they're teaching their children to do the very same thing, passing it off as normal. The codependents appear to be able to stop trying to fix, control, or save their loved ones. And this occurs even when the loved ones don't really need controlling or fixing. So I'm sure that you have observed that in your neighborhoods, in your families, where there are people that are in charge to the point where nobody can breathe without them giving their okay. And this is a symptom of codependency, but you look around and you may not see any symptom of other addictions. Well, I would say you ask that person, tell me a little bit about your family that you were growing up in. And there may be active addictions in that family, or they just might be active codependency that has been passed down to them. Codependency is so dangerous because the person loses their own identity. They no longer have their own identity. There are a series of behaviors that they must do in order to feel better. They can lose their self-respect. Some of the things that the family members, that the loved ones who are codependent do are just, it's quite a story in itself. And nobody would ever want to live like that, if that makes any sense. They can lose their health. And I remember years and years ago learning that we have someone who has a chronic addiction. We have the codependent partner, and sometimes the amount of stress that the codependent partner is under, they are sicker physically than the person that's the addict. You would expect, with putting these substances in the body, that the addict would be the sick one. And you would also expect that they would be the one that the children identify as the sick one, but a lot of times they don't. They'll be like, well, that one had an addiction, but that one was just mean. And it's not mean, it's codependency that looks very mean and is very mean. It can even go to violence. Can you go back one more? There you go. Or their negative effects in the family. It's very hard to accept as a codependent person what I have done because I wanted to do something good and right and because I wanted to save the family. There's a lot of shame that goes with that, and there are negative effects as well on the family from both the active addiction and from the active codependency. And then, yes, next slide. Okay, so we know that codependent behavior can begin in childhood under the face of stress and chaos. This is frightening to children and chaotic for that child. The parents are not able to make it better. The fighting, the unpredictable behaviors, the unfair rules, the lack of basic needs, the lack of sometimes supervision or too much supervision, the lack of choices. So the children are aware that there is a big problem and the parents aren't fixing it. So these children start to take on roles that help to what they believe to help stabilize the family. Do they say, oh yes, I think I need to take on a role? No, they just see the problem and their little selves want to make it better. Very similar to when my little child looked at grandma who was hurt and in a hospital and said, grandma, mosquito bite, rub it, make it better, put some medicine on it, 2 years old. So these little kids want to fix the family and they will start to take on roles in order to do that. And then these roles continue to be lived out in adulthood. And then the really sad and sick part is that we unconsciously seek similar situations because that's what we're good at and that's what's familiar to us. Does that make sense? And so there it goes again. And one of the roles is the scapegoat, which often, and all of them can be, all of the children have risk for becoming addicted. They all do. But there's one in particular called the scapegoat that almost always does. So it is as serious as any other chronic or unrelenting problems. It can become life-threatening due to poor impulse control or secondary disorders like severe anxiety or terrible depression. You start to see suicide attempts. You start to see people whose codependency even leads them then to their process addictions, very serious process addictions, so that they can feel better and feel in control. And also process addictions, and also just very risky behaviors and secondary disorders. So it gives the illusion of self-sufficiency. It gives the illusion that they're able to control. And since they have this intermittent effectiveness in bringing order, they will have denial of the real problem. All you got to do is do this. If they would just do this. And so the children, and I'll go over the roles with you. Characteristics, the next slide, please. Okay, so characteristics of both addiction and codependency is doing it over and over despite the negative consequences and evidence of harm. Blaming negative consequences on others in a way to deal with their own shame or fear. Risk loss all the time. This is codependency and addiction, risking loss of possessions, relationships, reputation, jobs, freedoms, work, health, sanity, money, self-esteem, support systems because of the using behaviors or the effects of it. Doing it or using in a way that I don't intend to. I never wanted to say the things I said when he or she called me on the phone or came in at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I slipped right into it. I'm unable to predict what will happen once I start using this particular drug, depending on where I am in the addiction. I will make promises and I will break promises to people or situations that I personally value. And I will use or do this progressively more and more. Next slide, please. The cost to this behavior outweighs the benefit. I begin hiding the truth. By the way, when I say next slide, it's next slide up here, but if you're following along in your notes, it's the same slide. Okay, I should probably tell you when I do that. Yeah, you noticed it? Okay. The cost outweighs the benefit, hiding and shame and doubt and confusion, unintended results because I become more impulsive. And impulsive is I do something without thinking. Compulsive is that I keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, okay? Loss of recall or insight. I didn't even know I did that. I don't remember that I did that. And that happens with the codependent as well as the addict. Minimizing, denying, rationalizing. I would have never done that if you hadn't. Blaming and trying to make up for it. You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's not that bad. I'll never do it again. Loss of rational decision making, and we can attribute that many times to behavioral habits and psychological needs that are trumping good sense. But we also can attribute to the fact that the brain begins to change. And so the part of our brain that's affected by these chemical rushes begins to not be as functional. It becomes damaged. The negative choices and behaviors become more normal. This is the way we live. We don't even realize it until somebody goes, and then we think, oh, somebody better cover that up quick. Okay, next slide, please. And it's in the top of yours says, and more. Loss of self-esteem, self-respect, isolation, so others won't know, or not caring. That's just how I am, and if they can't accept it, that's just too bad. It, whether it be the addiction or the codependent focus, becomes everything. Other relationships, events, work, they're all number two. It becomes number one as it progresses. Protecting the supply. If I know I'm going to a dry wedding reception, maybe I want to hit something a couple of times before I go, or I want to do some pre-drinking drinking. Even like if someone's codependent, if I'm going to be gone, I can't leave the family for a couple of days because I don't know what's going to happen. I need to have the access. I need to prepare. And if I do go, I make sure that I have just laid everything out, even though you would think that some of these people might be able to guess at what could be a good choice while I'm gone. But see, I start, as a codependent person, I start to believe that I'm running the world. Values that I've previously had with relationship to my actions my substances and the things that I do change. And now I'm valuing a whole different lifestyle. I remember somebody said to their child, I didn't raise you that way. That's correct, you didn't. That changed. Moods and thinking are altered even when not using. That's because the brain starts being affected and because there's that chronic crisis, the chronic shame and feelings. It affects all organs of the body, and overall judgment, perspective, and memories are affected over time. And next slide for this, but not for you. All right, tolerance, the ability to do things to a large degree or to use substances, either goes up or down. It goes up as I'm building my addiction. I can do more and more and more and more. And then when I hit the point, specifically in substance abuse, when I hit the point where my liver isn't able to detoxify the way that it should, then all of a sudden I'm like, cool, I can get drunk after 4 drinks. But it's not cool. Does that make sense? So it's a big deal. Dependence, psychological, physical, and the habit. And this can lead to very serious withdrawal. When I withdraw, I don't feel well. When I'm not using, I don't feel as comfortable. Cravings. I don't feel as comfortable. I start to think about it. My mind starts to obsess on what I need to do, what I need to take care of. And again, this is addiction, substance addiction, as well as process addictions. I call it the call of the wild. At that point, if a person has had much space from these substances, and let's just speak specifically about the opioids, if they've had very much space and they use again, they might go back to using the 10. I had a client that really shocked me at one point because she would crush up 10 of the high-dose Percocets at a time and snort them. That's how she took care of her need. And so when she went into treatment, and she did that several times a day, and that's why her habit was thousands of dollars per day, because she couldn't get those in a legitimate source, so she was having to buy them on the street or steal them. It was quite an ordeal for her to get her drugs. But she had cravings. Now, if she'd used that same level when she got out of treatment, not knowing, she could have overdosed easily because the brain begins to heal. The bad news is the brain is affected. The good news is the brain wants to heal. This gets worse if not stopped, and it's possible to have periods of abstinence, but really once the similar triggers appear, and if recovery is not an ongoing effort, it's quite a problem. Okay, let's go next slide, please. How do we make others face their problems? I mean, we've already decided that codependency is really not that great of a choice, but we can invite and we can give support to people. One of the really important first steps is to become educated. And so what you're doing today is extremely important. And then you may even be surprised that maybe you have the beginnings of an addictive pattern yourself. In our society, our culture is so set up for addiction that we can be well into it before it even occurs to us that there might be a dependence that's beginning. So we have to be brutally honest with ourselves, and sometimes if we have somebody that we love in the family, that brutal honesty can help all of us get a little bit more honest. So education is the very best, and self-assessment is the very best. I use a 1 to 10 scale in my office, and I really like it because it's very common. So let me try to tell you what it is. So the addictive behavior, I'm just going to call it that, the addictive behavior. So number 0 is I have no addictive behavior, none. 1 and 2 is, I do some stuff, it's okay. I can't even remember the last time that I did it, and it really doesn't mean that much to me. 3 and 4 is I'm doing it. I'm doing it, I'm liking it, and I don't appreciate it if people stick their nose in my business and tell me that I'm doing more than I should. Let's see, that was 3 and 4. 5 and 6 is I'm starting to have some trouble because people are nagging me, people are picking on me. I'm noticing that there's a lot of money that's going this or that. So I'm starting to have some trouble. This is an ideal spot for people to take a hard look and say, ooh, what would it be like if I was to say, hey, I don't want to be owned by this thing? And so what if I was to say, I think I'm either going to go back and practice that social use or do abstinence, no use, because it doesn't mean that much to me and I'm starting to have to give up things, or I deny it and I keep going. This is where we see DUIs, we see arrests, we see loss of jobs. You know, this is the perfect time to wake up. I do not suggest that people go back and try to practice doing heavy use when they were into problem use. I don't think it's helpful. I think it just prolongs things. So if I'm into problem use, I might want to face that and then just say, oh yeah, it was a good time. I tell my clients sometimes, I say, I say it with all seriousness, you're only allowed 1,400 drinks in your life, and after you pass that, you have to quit. And then I smile, because I can feel them counting on their fingers, you know. They're counting, and they're like, you know. And so then I say, no, I actually just made that up, but it does get their attention, because doesn't 1,400 sound like a lot? I mean, it does to me. I should probably bump that number up to 3,000 now. And then it'd be yet more believable, because we have such a culture of using stuff that maybe 1,400, I think I figured it out. It's not very much. I think it's like maybe 3 years of drinking if you drink every day or 2 or 3, I forget, but it's you know, it can go pretty fast if you've got an attachment to it. So back to the 1 to 10 scale, 6 and 7, I am really losing. 6, 7, and 8 there has been a lot of losses in my life, and I can't really deny that alcohol or drugs or even my codependent attitude and behavior has caused this and has caused that. But I don't necessarily will tell you, because you're already so critical of me. So I'm just going to kind of just try on my own to slow down a little bit. And yes, I'm worried about my health, and my doctor lectures me, and when my doctor says, you know, how about this, are you using that? We say, no, not really, not very much. I used to, but I'm really slowed down. Okay, so, and 9 and 10 is I am dying. And I will point blank look at every one of my clients that I think has an addiction problem, and I'll say, tell me, where do you think you were? Because they every time will nail themselves. Every time will say, oh yeah, I was thinking, you know, probably a 5, probably a 6, God, you know, 7 and 8, got it. You know, and they'll start talking because I have spoken truth with them. And they really appreciate that, because they're worried too. So it goes from I don't have any problems to I have an early problem, I have a middle problem, I have a late problem. I did give you some instruments if you want to look at them that test, and people can do their own tests. The audit is a favorite of mine. There's 14 questions, and again, they can say, you know, I think above 7 says that there's probably a problem or a alcoholic, this or that, and they see their own numbers, and they get to circle their own things. And I'm not lecturing them. I'm just asking them. I do ask them, please be as honest as you can. Another assessment that I really like, that I encourage you to even look up. These are not bad things. These are very easy to use and to read by regular people, not necessarily licensed people. It's called the Stages of Change Readiness and Treatment Eagerness Scale. That's a very long name. They call it Socrates 8. 8 is the version that they're on right now, but what it tests for is recognition that I have a problem, recognition I have a problem, ambivalence, the level of ambivalence. Do I feel sure that I have a problem? Do I feel sure that I don't have a problem? How much am I willy-wagging back and forth? So it tests that, and then it tests taking steps. So I think it's great, because if people have tried to do this and this and this, that shows they're doing something good. So yeah, keep trying. You may just need to access some more help. The self-compassion scale is excellent as well. And I compare that to the compassion for others scale because codependent people that have codependency, they usually score very low on self-compassion, and they usually score pretty high on compassion for others because they have no boundaries, and because by then they think they don't have any of their own needs. And then motivational interviewing skills, it's a very weird, I shouldn't say it's very weird, but it's a very weird name for something that's very, very good to use. And because it allows me to learn to ask questions and to engage with people who normally might want to shut me out, but if I can do it in a way that shows them that I care and that I'm not interested in controlling, which is the opposite of codependency, they really need that support. And so there's 4 tenets to that, and the first one is express empathy. I can relate to you because of my own process addiction, so I get it. If it's anything like I'm doing, I get it. The second one, roll with resistance. Try not to overreact when someone says, I'm not going to, or I don't want to, or whatever. Develop discrepancy says, oh, I was thinking that you told me you know, you're developing something that doesn't make sense. That's what develop discrepancy means. And the fourth one is support self-efficacy. It means you can be efficient. Yes, ma'am?
Will you say more about number 3?
Oh, sure. Number 3 is, but you said that you weren't going to drink tonight. Discrepancy says, oh, there's this, but there's this. Help me out with that. Oh, and you can act a little dumb. Some of us need to take some acting classes. We're way too much impulsive in the moment, just constantly, spilling the beans. And in reality, that's not helpful. We have to learn a little bit of this. We call it emotional regulation. Did that help you?
So you're trying to reflect back
To the person what it is that is the truth about their addiction, the truth about their behavior, even though they might be in denial.
right, so facts that don't line up.
There you go. Thank you. You said it well. Okay, and self-efficacy is the fact that I believe that you can do this, and I'm willing to support and help. I'm not willing to take over your life. Next slide, please. Yes, ma'am. That link that I put in there where it says HTTPS, that has all those instruments.
Okay, great.
You can find any of those that I spoke about. Thank you. Okay, so the brain and addiction or codependency. There is a basic part of our brain called the reward system that is a gift to us. It helps us to know to eat decent food. It helps us to know to drink plenty of water. It helps us to know to cover up with a blanket. It feels good. So the brain says, oh, good, you did what I needed you to do. That's the reward system. It helps us discover new things. It helps us to face life with hope, with courage, with positivity. It helps us to deal with obstacles, difficulties, discomfort, sadness. So the reward system is incredibly important. But addiction and codependency or process addiction hijacks it. Go to the next slide, please. So dopamine, the reward system, where are we at here? Oh, yeah, I flipped and I didn't have to, but you can go back one. Okay, so the reward system is exactly what we want and is exactly what we need, but it becomes hijacked by unnatural stimulation, okay? And it releases a jolt of dopamine. And dopamine makes a person feel good, okay? It's a neurotransmitter. That begins a cycle. That begins a time of flying. Like the hijacking, remember, flying, but I'm not in control of the plane. So I have an exaggerated experience, and then I have beginnings of the compulsion to do it again and again. Next slide. Okay, so if you count on your fingers, and I have a pretty educated daughter, very highly educated daughter that loves to use her fingers to count. I love that. And it just makes her seem more common to the people that she's serving. But if you count on your fingers, there's 5 processes that happen. The first one is that dopamine is released in response to some sort of a stimuli, some sort of an electrical impulse that says, whoa, okay, whether it be a substance or an action. And that can include, remember back to the slide of how addiction can show up, passive addiction or process addiction. It can show up even with releasing rage. Make sense? So dopamine, when I get my way, when I am in control, dopamine is released. So dopamine is released. It floods the neural pathway, and it starts with what's called the nucleus accumbens. Oh, that is a little weird, but under flood, that's the part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. I think you have it on your slides. Yes, you can see it? Okay. And so that nucleus accumbens stimulates motivation and action. Happy day. So I've done something well. I've taken that drink of water. It was so great when I got off the plane and drank a lot of cold ice water. And my brain said, oh, good. And I was motivated. Go get another drink because maybe you're more dehydrated than you even know. The hippocampus, another part of the brain, lays down memories of this satisfaction, of this joy. The amygdala is in charge of the emotional response. So we're at 4. Dopamine, nucleus accumbens, hippocampus is memories, amygdala is emotional connection. When I have an emotional connection that is connected with a memory of something that happened, it is solid in my brain. And that's what happens in trauma, by the way. But that also happens in good things. You know, a little pumpkin that I'm around these days, he's clapping his hands. And so he's going to continue to clap his hands because he has the experience of it, the memory of the last time he clapped his hands that we were so, happy day, and he has the emotional. Then there's a tracking system just in case you forget where you're going. And the tracking system in the reward thing is called delta FOS B, and it has the job to help you remember how to make that happen again. I am really pleased to be able to give you this, because there are people that truly believe that addiction and codependency across the board are character problems. And when we look at how the brain is flooded with dopamine and how we're motivated to take action and how we have a memory and how we attach an emotion, and oh, by the way, in case you can't remember how to get there, that other substance tells us exactly how to do this again. So I think, you could make a copy of that page and just give it to anybody that says it's just a character problem. So, yes, that in the place number 5 on in your thing, it's called the tracking system. It's in that I guess I'm not a wizard. That I stands for Delta FOS B, and it's the tracking system that lays down the ability to do it again. I think of it as breadcrumbs in the Hansel and Gretel story. Find your way home. Only this one doesn't go away. With chronic use, the brain adapts and becomes less sensitive, because if I'm flooding with dopamine all the time, it's exhausting. Think about how you have a sense when you walk into a certain place and you smell the smell, and after a while you don't smell it anymore. It's because the receptors start to become less alert, and they're not doing what they should do. So dopamine receptors become less alert and less active, and some of them shut down. So then what does that say to you? When the dopamine receptors are shutting down and I can't get that same high I got the last time, what do I need to do? I need to do more. Good. So there's, next slide, please. So setting your brain up for that overload might feel wonderful, but that's what we call chasing the high, because there's nothing ever going to be quite as good as that first high. But the brain actually cuts down on the receptors. This is a slide about porn, and porn is an unbelievable money-making epidemic that's very easily available. People want connection. They want to feel valuable. They want to feel important. They want to feel relieved. They want to feel satisfied. And if we are not doing that in healthy ways, then porn is right there waiting. It's a way to make me feel good. Yes?
Before porn, I wanted to mention, I've heard that people who do heroin, the biggest problem is the very first time you do it is absolutely amazing, and they can never find.
That's correct. That's
I've worked
correct.
with some folks, unfortunately, on the campus that had a heroin arm in his needle, or a needle in his arm. And I've heard that said a few times that I could never get that amazing first time.
That's right. And also do understand where it says, under the place where it says dopamine rush, understand that normal pleasurable experiences don't even hit the radar. So normal jokes, normal experiences like going out to eat with my family or going to the movies or singing a song or laughing, or that doesn't hit the radar because the amount of dopamine that's released, that normal amount of dopamine that's released is so pitiful compared to the dopamine that's released when we're using drugs or when we're having these very big moments. All right. So next slide, please. And we can skip that one. And I'm sorry? Did someone have a question? Whoops. Oh, you're okay. So dopamine, it absolutely becomes a brain disorder, and please see that sentence in bold that says, overcoming it is not as simple as just stopping or exercising better control. It is foolish and counterproductive to say to an addict, just don't drink so much. I'm okay if you smoke pot. I just don't want you to do it and you might lose your job. Can you wait till we go on vacation? It's counterproductive. So let's get real about that. So there's something called dope sick, and you were almost speaking of that when you started talking about can't get the high, because it's not only can't get the high, but when the lows come, they're so low. And so we call that dope sick. And that is the reality. In the brain starts to have more and more depression, more and more anxiety. I don't have pleasure. I don't feel relief. I don't feel good. So it can be pretty uncomfortable. And a person has to allow time and space and with lots of support for their brain to start to heal, because it's very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Okay, next, please. This is just more on why porn is so devastating at this point. It's because we can keep many tabs open. We have a constant stream. There's compilation videos, and so there's short clips. They're coming in dozens and dozens of different scenes. They're set up to work that way. So it's called supernormal stimulus. It's super, overdrive stimulus. And so the person hardly stands a chance. Now, appreciate that, the porn of 50 years ago or 40 years ago, you might have had to wait for it to come in the mail. And, you might have had to grab a minute here or there. This is very, very different when we're talking about internet access. And so we have people to legitimize it and say, oh, come on, that's no problem. But it will destroy marriages, and marriages, it will destroy families, it will just hurt the child's brain as they're trying to grow. The other thing that I want to tell people is we never used to see impotence in younger men, typically. We're seeing it now. It's because of the porn. It's because they can't have a normal sexual interaction because it's just not stimulating enough. Yes.
There's another component of this too, deep fake videos, where if you have, for instance, I love Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I
Yeah.
could go online and see Jamie Lee Curtis having sex, even though it's not her.
Isn't that? I know. There's many things we don't know, and so we better be opening our eyes the best we can and talking about this. It's okay to talk about it. Okay, so next slide, please. How does addiction impact us? What did you say? Oh, you don't want to? It affects us in virtually every area of society. First of all, our personal well-being, our ability to form and maintain love, family, safety, and structure. Most important is our children, because we're setting them up and they're using, And some of the times they're using substances that are in the home that somebody has said to them, oh, come on, it's not that big of a deal. And in the case of marijuana, it's legal. And so it's disturbing. I did have slides that if you, I have cards too, and so if you want to take my cards, I have more slides about how the normal brain looks and then how the brain on this drug looks. It's very interesting how the blood flow looks. Okay, so yeah, it affects not only all this stuff in bold that's very important, but then we're talking about the criminal justice system. It's estimated that 85% of the prison population has some sort of either active addiction problem or they were incarcerated due to their involvement with drugs or alcohol. So medical systems, education, social welfare, employment, the economy is unbelievable. So I applaud the people that are listening and participating in this workshop. It's a big deal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the setup for addiction and codependency. Why does this happen? Well, everybody else does it, and I don't have coping skills. I mean, I thought I did. I thought screaming and yelling was one. Lack of maturity. I've not had to do things for myself because I've not had to make smart decisions because somebody else is telling me what to do all the time. That's codependency affecting the family. A family history and generational and easy access as a child. Start young when I'm training the brain to what I have to have. Unrealistic expectations of myself and others. Even the medical system. Sometimes I think, oh, well, they would have. The government and the medical system would have done something about this. Well, it's a lot more complex than that. We aren't always aware. We have a lot of pain in our lives. We have emotional pain, we have physical pain, and we don't always have guidance as to what we need to do with that pain. You're always supposed to ask the experts and follow what the experts say, but sometimes the experts either don't know or they just, their ability to help you solve the problem is not very effective. I got mood, thoughts, behavioral problems that it seems to help. I don't have perspective. I'm disconnected from myself. I have my own heavy or problematic use, and I don't want to call myself out, so I'm going to just like keep a low profile about that. There's overwhelming tentacles of addiction and how it affects. We don't always have good options for adventure and recreation, and so we decide, let's play games with our brain. It'll be great. Oh, yeah, thank you. Then we just in general are lacking in knowledge about addiction. And so then we're establishing norms that say it's okay, it's no big deal. We can be very naive if we've not studied. And we can say, well, you know, the shrooms are okay because they were grown here and they were grown there. Okay, good. Okay, next slide, please. And I am 5 minutes over, and but not too far from the end. Okay? Okay. Okay. Oh, good. And so this one says, we attach because we're human. We want to connect. We want to attach. And on the other hand, we survive because we must. Now, this is an example of a family system. There is no connection in this system to healthy structure or healthy boundaries. Do you see that? The children, which are these smaller circles, are trying to go to that place where me and you overlap each other. They're trying to go to their parents for support and help and care. And what's happening is the one that says you is so focused on me, the one with the addiction, that this particular person or the addict who's so focused on their own addiction, they're not paying attention to the children. And so one's wrapped around their addiction, the other's wrapped around the one that has the addiction in a big way, trying to keep it together. And I'm not blaming anybody. I understand. And then you see the connection. So the children, If the parents don't come to the children want to come to the parents, and they try. But it becomes weaker and weaker. So then they have to bond with something else, like the family hero bonds with getting the great grades or making a big splash. So don't underestimate the people that are coming with these great achievements and thinking, well, they must have a really healthy family, because they may or may not. Okay, the mascot, and there's an error in my slide there, and it should say clown, but the mascot would laugh about it, makes some kind of joke about that. Because all of these different family members are just trying to make the family system stable and make it so it doesn't seem so frightening. Make sense? Okay. The chief enabler is the one that assists if there's to be an assistant. It depends on how many children there are. We used to have big families, then we had very little families, and now we have people that have very big families, because they have a sibling here and a sibling there and another one, this one and this one and this one, and then we have two over here, and they all are under the umbrella of this family. So be aware, there's a lot of children. So we can have 2 or 3 mascots, we can have several scapegoats, don't worry about it. We generally don't have too many heroes, family heroes that are the golden child, you know what I'm saying, the one that just does everything right. But we could have many enablers. I know my husband had the example of being an enabler when he was a young kid. He wasn't old enough to drive. He got an opportunity to drive his dad home at a very young age. Just do this, just do that. So I thought I asked a lot of questions. Notice the one that says lost. Do you see the one off to the left where it's healthy boundaries? What's different about that one? It was an accident, but it was kind of a slip that I'm glad happened. What do you notice about that saying there?
Lost cause, it's something that's hidden.
It's hidden. It's a lost child. It's a lost child. This child says, if I just stay under the radar, if I just don't cause any trouble. This is the good child that they say, I didn't ever have to worry about that child. That child just sat there. Isn't that good? And then we have one that doesn't even have a label. Do you see that? Yeah. Okay. So next slide, please. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that we have at basic, we have to have food and shelter. We must have the things to keep us alive, okay? Then right behind that is we need safety and security. And we need to know that our parents are leaders and that our backyard is safe, okay? And these two things are very missing in an addictive home. They can seem like they are depending how much money the family has. Sometimes they can buy things that look like safety, security, and that the child is getting their needs. But they may or may not be able to be cared for by the family. So this is when the children take over and the children start saying, you know what, we got to figure it out. I don't know if any of you watched the show Breaking Bad, and it wasn't that great of a show. It was pretty good, but it was very informative about addiction. But there was one scene in it that just, oh my gosh, it got a hold of me. This guy went over to this other person's house to collect money. You either give me back the drugs or you give me the money. Okay? And he was going to take care of business. He goes in there, and there wasn't anybody. There was he came busting in the door, and there wasn't any adults there. And so he thought, I'll just wait for him. So he sat down, and pretty soon this little kid walks out. He was in one of the bedrooms, and this little kid just turns on the TV, or maybe the TV was on already, I don't remember, sat on the couch, never even noticed the stranger in his house. Never even noticed. So this guy's just sitting there thinking, that's weird. This is the drug dealer that's thinking, that's weird. And pretty soon the little kid looks at him and he says, I'm hungry. And the drug dealer's like, I mean, this is a little kid, maybe 4. And he's like, oh my God, what do we need to do here? And so, I think he scrounged around and he found him some cereal or something, but it was just pathetic. And that's real. I mean, that's not the problem with the continuum of addiction and the way that it passes through all cultures and all situations is that we could use that to keep our denial. We want love and belonging. A lot of what we're seeing is the next girlfriend, the next boyfriend, so we haul the kids along, and these kids never belonged in the first place, and they're hoping that this time this will work out better. Self-actualization and self-esteem is when we really, sometimes we really just want to give these children so much good stuff, especially if there's addiction in the family, because we want to make up for it. And, but in reality, they're not getting some of the structure that they need. Okay, stages of change. Now, let's go back to slide number 4, Elaine. You can do it. Yes, I can. I know. Yeah. And take a look. Now, we know the addiction, we know those are the ones we could have spouted off. These are the ones that, are somewhere on that continuum between, I don't have a problem at all, to, man, I'm just ruining my life. And so just look at those and think about those, and maybe even think about yourself. And think about, is there anything that I need to learn about me in this workshop? And so if there is, now flip back to slide number 29. Woo! So good. And this is a great thing. So this is used in the counseling field. To really assess, where is this client at stage 1? I don't have a problem. Now, there's a fancy psychological name for that. It's called pre-contemplation. It's all right, but it doesn't mean anything to me. Not really. Do you make sense? I want it to be practical because we don't have enough clinicians. Do you understand that? We don't have near enough clinicians. B has a job that says she's got to try to refer people. And she's finding there is not enough clinicians, so we absolutely need to be helping ourselves and helping each other. So stage 1 is, I got no problem. Somebody else thinks I got a problem, but I got nothing. I don't think I need to change. I think everything's fine. Just get off my back. Number 2, I have an issue, but I'm not ready and I don't want to, and I'm working on it a little bit. I'm thinking about it, but I'm kind of thinking I might want to change, but I'm not ready. Stage 3, I'm getting ready. I'm preparing. I'm asking around a little bit, but just a minute. Oh, yeah, I do have plans for tonight. And so I'm starting to get closer, and I'm starting to be more open. And stage 4 is I'm actively changing. Oh, next slide, please. Not for you. I'm changing. I'm working on and working on my attitudes, working on my behaviors. I've identified people that can help me or process that can help me, and I'm humbling myself. I'm using it to help me. It's a change. It's a big deal. It can last a long time, maybe the rest of our lives. Stage 5 is I've changed for good. I'm in maintenance. Now, I don't agree that I've changed for good because it's always there just waiting for me to make a bad choice, because at that point it is a choice. And so I've changed, but now I'm maintaining it actively. So it really is an extension of 4 because I'm maintaining it. It's not that bad, that hard. Sometimes this is where people screw up because they say, well, I haven't used anything in, 6 months, 10 years. And so then they say, well, I can probably. And, I'm working with a guy right now, and I had to discharge him out of my practice because I personally, as a clinician, cannot try to change someone. I can only be with them. And if they want to change, I can be with them. If they give me this much, I'll take it. Let's go. But I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see either one of them. And she was just as difficult as he was because I said, the only thing I want you to do is I want you to go to AA. I used to go. I thought that some of the people were just, they were making, they were like boring, and they were, they weren't really digging in. I wanted to dig in. That's what the guy told me. I wanted to dig in. I was like, cool, because you just moved to this area, and these people here, they dig in. They're all about it. Let's develop a good life. It's just not about not using. It's developing a life. So I thought sure he was going to do it. I gave him names. I said, come on, let's go. 2 and 3 weeks and more fighting and more violence, and he's stopping, and he decided to stop into the bar, and he did those things where if you wouldn't have, I wouldn't have, and those things. And I told her, I said, go to Al-Anon. go to Al-Anon. Or find something that's going to address your codependency, because the amount of toxicity that you're bringing in on a daily basis is not helpful. She wouldn't either. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I discharged him too soon. Maybe I should have stuck with him another 3 weeks or something. I don't know. But I'll tell you what it was starting to do. Starting to make me sick. All right. So 6 is I've slipped up, and some of my old behaviors are back, and I might want to get back on track, or I might just want to say forget it. Okay, go please. Okay, when I am looking at recovery, I have to be realistic. I have to understand that the life experience there at the bottom feeds everything. The values come out of that, the beliefs come out of that, and then my thoughts I am in control over, as well as my beliefs. I can start to challenge those at any time. My feelings, I can deal with my feelings. I can even work with changing my feelings. But to deny my feelings is probably a bad choice. But if I think I'm going to change behaviors, attitudes, and choices and not address any of that, probably not going to help. So it's a pretty comprehensive thing. Okay, you can go ahead. Love, a lack of providers. Oh, love is the most powerful weapon for good in the world. Of course. Sure, go back.
I don't understand. Are you saying that you have to change the life experience of values?
Well, I can change my, I'm sorry, I cut you off, please.
Okay, I'm just trying to say, are you saying you can't change these on the bottom?
Well, you can't change the past, but you absolutely can change your new life experiences, or
That's the top,
above the line, above the water is what we see. And people bring the rest of the stuff in their backpacks.
Okay.
And I can change, they can change and have new life experiences, no doubt, and it happens. That's what recovery is all about. That's why it's so wonderful. And they can change their values and they can change their beliefs. It's a big deal, though, because remember, they're changing a system that was built when they were 2 years old, possibly. Okay. I talked to you about lack of providers. I want you to all take a deep breath. You are not alone. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be certified in addictions to be part of the solution. If I wasn't so nervous or whatever it is, I would have insisted, I say insist, as a good codependent would, that my daughter and her husband came. But they didn't offer. And I thought, that's okay. I'm taking care of me today. Yeah, because, it's a good thing. So you don't have to be certified, but you can understand, and you can be compassionate, and you can use common sense, and you can learn to listen well. And just a real quick thing on listening well. If I'm saying something to you, and you really care about what I'm saying to me, did I say that right? If you really care about what I've said to you, then you will repeat it back, and you will say, oh, so you la 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 la. And then you wait for the head nod. And if you don't get the head nod, you say, oh, I must have not. What is it again? Tell me again. Please be patient with me. Okay? And then you can even kind of take a wild stab at it sometimes, and you can say, so you believe that blank? And that's a question. And that will ask them, it'll take it just a little deeper. So you're feeling like you're the lowest scumbag in the world? That's really how you're feeling? That's what I heard when you said that? You probably don't want me to come to dinner anymore, Mom, Dad. You feel like you're not worthy to be in our home? Is that how you feel? See, I'm listening. And then they say, yes, that's true, or no, that's not true. That's real effective listening. But we can talk more about that another time. Okay, perspective. So everybody's got their perspective, and we don't have to argue about it. We just have to understand that if I never move, if I never come to a program, if I never watch it in the privacy of my home, then I probably won't know any more than I know today. And then I'll argue about it, and I'll say, no, an elephant is a rug. Don't you? This thing is a rug. Because these 6 blind people all wanted to know more about elephants. So they took them and they presented them. It's a legend, but it's a very old legend. They put them around an elephant and they said, now tell us what you see. And so one said, well, it's a tree with stones around the bottom. It's wonderful. And then another one said, no, you're wrong. It's a rope. And another one said, no, it's a long pipe that moves. And it's, And so if we do not ever walk around the elephant, we won't get perspective. This is another one where it says not okay. I happened to be working with someone who had had a lot of poor behavior, and she had what looked like poison coming out of her mouth. And so I was scared to talk to her, but she had power because she actually was in charge of payroll and those kinds of things. And so you had to be like I don't know, you just had to not like go crazy about the fact that she was so hard to be with and that she was so mean to everyone. And so finally I got some papers back that I had taken on behalf of an employee and filed them for overtime. And I got them back with just a sticky note that said, what's that say? Not okay. That's what I thought too. And I thought, I just can't take this anymore. See, do you hear the codependency? I can't take this anymore. And I thought, no, then I want you to hear the health. I'm going to sit on this for about 2 days. I can't sit longer because payroll's coming. And my employees are depending on me. And so finally I went in and I took a deep breath. And I said to her, I called her by name, and I said, tell me what it is that's not okay about these papers. And she looked at me with the biggest amount of disdain on her face and said, it doesn't say not okay. I said, it doesn't? What does it say? Please tell me. She said, it says not overtime. No overtime. Do you see it? No. No T. No OT. Not overtime. Isn't that wild? And so I was so grateful for that gift because that's my assumption. Yeah, you see the okay, don't you? Do you see the overtime? O/T. Well, if you don't see it, I'll help you later. But it's all right, because I didn't see it. And I just assumed. And so I really appreciate it. And we can skip the other one. On your paper, it just kind of doesn't look like much. But what is this? Well, my perspective might mean it's a dead end, or my perspective might mean it's something else, or it's hope because I see some beautiful rays of sun coming in or whatever, okay? So perspective means everything. So let's get a perspective that's hopeful. Next slide, please. Okay, so what happened with the opiate crisis is that we really knew, the people with common sense said, oh, I think this is too good to be true. And the research and the leaders said, no, this is right. And so then they put pressure on the practitioners to make sure that nobody had pain. I mean that. I was working. So were you, B. They put pressure on the practitioners that if anybody had a pain level above a 2, you were risking getting written up by Joint Commission. Okay, so then we start handing pain pills out like candy, and I'm telling you the whole ones that we're abusing today. And, okay, so let's learn. It's okay to think. It's okay to not think that medical research, and the government will always know exactly the right thing to do, that at some point we're going to have to say to our family, I don't like it. I don't want it. Let's not do that in our home. Okay, so go, next slide, please. What should we do? Improve our knowledge. Ask ourselves if we're protecting our own self-interest. Increase our courage. Do it for the children. Keep working to improve our assertive communication. Use I statements. Listen. Come from love, not judgment. Humbly face ourselves and ask for help whenever we need it. And remember, we're all in this together. And I think that would be a lovely place to stop. Is it? No, not quite. To address or not to address, we can skip that. Questions that you might want to ask, and you can look at those later. I wonder if, I'm a little concerned, I could be wrong. Okay, go ahead. Look within, establish trust, establish rapport. How do I show that I'm trustworthy? Don't promise something I can't deliver. Go ahead, next one. Keep lines of communication open. Try not to say never and always and things like that shut things down. Establish rules and boundaries and expectations, and understand that people that are not really, they're not doing legal things, they're not very interested in rules. So if we're going to set rules, we probably ought to make sure that we are really prepared to enforce them, and there's not one thing wrong with that. All right, go ahead. Bill of Rights, lovely. You have the right to have a life beyond mere survival. Don't be just motivated by fear. You have the right to say no. You have the right to have feelings. If you are told or you feel guilty about everything, it's probably not true. You have the right to make mistakes. You have the right to terminate conversations with people that put you down. Next slide, please. You can be healthier than those around you. There's a terrible guilt with that. It's very sad to see that someone is losing their life and there's just nothing you can do except take care of yourself. Sometimes it comes to that. You have the right to change and grow. You have the right to play. It's all right to be to set limits and to take care of yourself. I don't like the word selfish in this context, so of course I changed it. Tim Kermack might not have minded at all. You can be angry at someone that you love. Anger is okay. Just make sure that you stay in the bounds of what's called for things of communication or assertive communication. You can take care of yourself no matter what circumstances you're in. Okay, go. This is a pushback that says, no, I'll be uncomfortable, I'll be scared, I'll say the wrong thing, it's going to be awful. Yeah, it might be. You might live through it. And that's one of the things we're going to have to do is develop some more resiliency. Go ahead. The 3 A's are awareness. We have to notice without judgment, without creating a story, because we're real good at making up stories. And then we want to use our wise mind, and other wise people are training to come up with our best insight or our best version of the truth. Then we want to come face to face with that version of the truth. We don't want to run, hide, or decorate it. We need to take responsibility for what part of this is mine, and then we take action. Do or not do something that's a reflection of my best self. I own my life, you own yours. Children are the exception. They can't own their life. They're not old enough. So we can let them do whatever it is that they can do to own their lives, but we have to take care of them. I'm responsible for parenting children, okay? Motivational interviewing was those questions I was telling you about, the 4 tenets that says develop discrepancy and empathy and self-sufficiency. These are questions that help you know how you're doing. How am I doing? Do I listen more than I talk? Do I assume this person, doesn't know what they're doing? And, how am I doing on that? Go next slide, please. Okay. Do I value this person's opinion? Or am I really just valuing my own thinking? Go ahead. And this is what it should look like. We attach in healthy ways. We have structure. We have healthy boundaries. There's a back and forth sharing in the family and even in our communities. Go ahead. We did it. Thank you. Appreciate you. Now, I know we're late, and I appreciate that. Oh, good. Okay, so questions or comments? Yes. Do you want me to get you the microphone so you'll make sure that you're heard? Okay, she's going to get it for you. Okay, you got to go? Okay, that's okay. Yes, but for a different presentation, but I can talk to you.
Okay,
All
I'll
right,
talk to you tomorrow.
good.
Did you want to say at the fellowship? Okay.
She's got to fly, but ready for your question.
Okay, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. I actually came because I'm deeply concerned about the homeless
Yes.
here in Ashland. I've done some reporting on Nextdoor of the various sides of what's going on and trying to remain have a neutral perspective.
Good.
I also learned a lot about myself and my family from this. This was incredible.
Great.
But I am really curious to know about the resources in Ashland for recovery that I can help publicize.
Sure.
I know here at the First Presbyterian there was some active 12-step at one point.
Okay,
My husband and I actually attend. My husband's a former heroin addict from when he was very young.
great. So You are familiar then with
I'm
that?
familiar, yeah, and, but I wanted to know if you know about the current resources that I could refer people to.
Usually you can find the resources, and we'll let Doug speak to this too, but usually you can find the resources if you go to aa.org or alanon.org, and I think those are always good. And then if you want something special like Narcotics Anonymous or Codependency Anonymous, oftentimes you're on that track, then you can find it. But yeah, the aa.org or alanon.org and then you can put in your zip code. And those will be a good help if you're looking for supports. Now, as far as treatment centers, I'm not the one to ask because I'm from Ohio, but we could perhaps, start looking. I'm sure they're there, although I'm sure they're also fairly minimal and whatever.
Yeah, there's a great list I posted on Nextdoor. So I've been doing a lot of research.
Thank you for that work.
Yeah, you bet. Just wanting to publicize because a lot of the work here with the homeless focuses on housing only and not
Yes.
recovery, which I don't understand.
I understand. Well, I'm going to give a presentation on Monday to the Aura. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And what did you say that you published it in? What did you say about Nextdoor?
Nextdoor.
That's the name of an organization.
It's a social media platform for neighbors, and it tends to be
Nice.
a lot of homeowners here in
All
Ashland.
right, thank you. So Nextdoor, she's done some work on Facebook? No, oh, you
Like
don't.
Facebook.
So how would people find the people that are listening on?
They
There's an app.
Yes, Nextdoor is an app similar to Facebook.
All right, so
So if
Nextdoor
they
is an
go
app.
on nextdoor.com and they type in the word addiction or the word recovery, I posted about your presentation.
Nice.
And I also am posting a lot about local
Thank you.
resources.
Thank you. And Doug, do you want to speak about the meetings here? Sure. Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Oh, sure.
Or I can,
Well, let him. Why don't you grab?
Wrap us up and then we can,
okay.
I think they're gonna be, because I have a sermon I still have to finish. So to answer questions about here at this particular church, we have AA groups that meet 6 out of 7 days a week except Sunday. There are different levels of AA. There's one that it's more laid back that meets in the chapel. And then there are the more, I think, hardcore groups that meet at 7 a.m. every day. We also have Overeaters Anonymous. We have Al-Anon. We have Debtors Anonymous. So there are a lot of different areas of recovery here that folks reach out to. And I would say Aura is a great resource for the unhoused because one of the things, I'm on the board, I was president last year. One of the things that we do is we make sure that folks have navigators so that it's not just that we have housed you, well, that's the first step. It's now that you're housed, what's your plan and what are your struggles? And so it's more holistic and wraparound. So I'm going to go ahead if I can and thank Joanne for being with us today. And hopefully you'll have a chance to watch this presentation. If you have comments or questions, please do let us know here at the First Presbyterian Church of Ashland. You can go onto our website. There's a way to connect there. And then also the number that Joanne mentioned at the beginning, 541-482-3536. Give us a call.
May I say one more thing?
Okay, sure.
It sounds like this particular church is beautifully taking responsibility, and I love that. And so anyone who's listening to this presentation, and you can tap into any of those other organizations or churches, please encourage them to do the same. It's critically important. I love what you're doing.